Canada's foreign ministry says it is trying to make contact with the second Canadian who is believed to have been detained in China. Michael Spavor, a businessman based in Dandong, near the North Korean border, had contacted Canadian officials this week to say he was being questioned. Foreign Ministry spokesman Gillian Robb said Canada was working hard to determine Mr. Spavor's whereabouts. It comes after former diplomat Mr Kovrig was arrested in China this week. Canadian officials say the reason for Mr. Kovrig's detention remains unclear, but Chinese state media have reported that Mr. Kovrig is being held on suspicion of engaging in activities that harm China's state security. Mr. Kovrig currently works for a think tank, the International Crisis Group (ICG), which has said it is concerned for his health and safety. At a news conference in Ottawa on Wednesday, Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland said Mr. Kovrig's case had been raised directly with Chinese officials. She also said a second Canadian had contacted them earlier in the week because he was being asked questions by Chinese authorities. She did not name the individual, saying it was a delicate situation and she wanted to respect his privacy. But Mr. Robb later named the man in a statement as Mr. Spavor and said he was presently missing in China. Chinese state media confirmed on Thursday that, as with the previous arrest, Mr. Spavor was under investigation on suspicion of engaging in activities that endanger China's national security. Mr. Spavor runs an organization called Peak to Cultural Exchange, which organizes business, culture, and tourism trips to North Korea. He is a regular visitor to North Korea and regularly comments in the media on Korean issues. He is particularly well known for helping to arrange the visit by former NBA star Dennis Rodman to North Korea in 2013. Rodman is a personal friend of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. His last tweet on Sunday said he was about to travel to Seoul in South Korea, but he did not arrive on Monday as planned. The detentions have come after Canada arrested Chinese telecoms executive Man Wanzhou last week. Ms. Man is the chief financial officer of Huawei, one of China's biggest telecoms companies, and the daughter of its founder. She was arrested at the request of the US and is accused of violating sanctions on Iran. She was granted bail on Tuesday for
$10 M6 米7 4 米
bail, but could be extradited to the US. China has demanded that Canada release Ms. Man and has threatened unspecific consequences. Canada has said there is currently no explicit indication of any link between her arrest and Mr. Kovrig's detention. A crash involving a high-speed train at a station in the Turkish capital Ankara has killed at least 4 people and injured more than 40. Local media say images from the scene showed emergency services working to rescue people from badly damaged carriages on Thursday morning. Some reports, citing local officials, suggested that the high-speed train had collided with another train. The accident occurred at about
6:30
local time,
3:30
GMT. The train was reportedly beginning its journey from the station in Ankara to the city of Konya in western Turkey. A large number of emergency workers arrived at the scene shortly after the crash, which occurred in snowy conditions. In July, 24 people were killed in Turkey when a train traveling from the northwestern town of Kapıkulen en route to Istanbul derailed. North and South Korean soldiers have made several friendly crossings into each other's territory for the first time since the countries were divided. The men were checking the dismantling of guard posts in the demilitarized zone DMZ along the border as part of the two sides' recent rapprochement. Footage showed the soldiers shaking hands at the border before crossing. The Korean War in the 1950s left the peninsula divided, and no formal peace treaty has ever been signed. As part of the talks between the divided peninsula, the South's President Moon Jae-in and the North's Kim Jong-un agreed to remove some of the guard posts on the heavily fortified border. The two leaders held a historic meeting in April, which led to talk between North Korea and the US. Since November, both North and South have blown up or dismantled 10 of their border posts. On Wednesday, South Korean inspectors visited each of the guard posts on the North side, while North Korean inspectors later inspected the same process in the South. This marks the first time since the division that the soldiers of the North and South are peacefully crossing the military demarcation line. The South Korean Defense Ministry said in a statement, both sides still have more guard posts in the DMZ, both over and underground. Laura Baker, BBC News. So this would have been unthinkable 12 months ago. Last November, shots rang out across the DMZ after a North Korean soldier made a dash across the border. Now the two sides are shaking hands, exchanging cigarettes and walking into each other's territory peacefully for the first time. Seoul hopes that these small steps will be irreversible, and it will become difficult for either side to backtrack on what they believe is a path towards peace. But the insurmountable obstacle remains the North's nuclear weapons. The United States maintains it will never allow an agreement to formally end the Korean War, nor will it lift economic sanctions imposed upon the North, while the Kim regime poses a nuclear threat. So yes, applaud these images and the progress that they represent, but it is worth keeping in mind just how very far this potential peace process has to go. Last month a train traveled from South Korea across the border into North Korea for the first time in decades, as part of a commitment by the South to help the North modernize its rail network. There has been speculation Mr. Kim could visit Seoul this year, but the Southeast government earlier this week said that no such trip was expected before 2019. Despite its misleading name, the DMZ is one of the world's most heavily fortified places. The area is a strip of land
250千米，1.5
miles long and
4000米，2.5
miles wide that runs across the peninsula. It is heavily mined and fortified, with barbed wire, rows of surveillance cameras and electric fencing, and is guarded by tens of thousands of troops on both sides. An Iranian political activist jailed for his messages on social media has died after spending 60 days on hunger strike. His family says Wahid Sayyid-Nusayri had been accused of insulting Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and other offenses. He was released last March after serving 2.5 years in prison, but detained again 5 months later. The activist demanded his transfer from a high-security unit of a prison in the city of Qom to a different location. Wahid Sayyid-Nusayri was initially arrested in September 2015 and sentenced to 8 years in prison for insulting the Supreme Leader and propaganda against the state, according to the advocacy group Iran Human Rights Monitor. The charges were related to posts he had made on his Facebook page. He was later pardoned and released early. However, he was arrested again in August, just months after his release, reportedly on similar charges. He began his hunger strike in October, in protest at the conditions of his imprisonment and his lack of access to a lawyer. According to Iran Human Rights Monitor, he also said the principle of separation of prisoners' crimes was being violated as he was being held with ordinary criminals and was being attacked and harassed. The group said conditions in the Qom prison are described as harsh. Correspondents say The activist had reportedly been taken to hospital in the wake of his hunger strike. His sister, Elijah, said the family had been informed by authorities of his death. No other details were immediately available. He came out from the porch of a building armed with a pistol in his hand, his arm outstretched. One eyewitness to the shooting in Strasbourg told French-made machine stumbled into the path of the gunman and was lucky to survive. Roger was one of many people taking in the Christmas markets with some friends when the first shots rang out. He headed towards a gentleman walking in front of me and immediately fired a bullet at his head, she told Radio Monte Carlo RMC. The man collapsed, and the guy opened fire again at someone else, who fell to the ground too, she added. Her two friends ran, screaming. Roger was left standing face to face with the shooter, paralyzed with fear. He turned around. I was facing him, she told the radio station. He ran off and went under another porch. Why did not he shoot at me? I do not know. I think I was extremely lucky. As everyone was screaming, he fled. Another witness named Jonathan was working as a waiter when he heard the gunfire. I thought it was our slate that had just fallen outside. He told Johnny Ray's Nouvelles d'Alsace. But then, he discovered a man lying on the ground, bleeding. He quickly retreated inside and barricaded the restaurant, telling all his customers to get down. But then, he discovered the injured man had not been alone, and had been waiting outside for his family. The wife, who was with her son in the restaurant, was in the bathroom, and when she came out, we had to tell her that her husband was shot, he told RMC. I heard the gunfire and ran towards the shots. From what told the local Alsace website, the subject-year-old resident had been walking nearby when the attack happened, and found a man in his 50s lying wounded on the ground outside an ice cream parlor. He phoned his brother, a doctor, to ask how he could help. He explained to me that I had to compress the wound, but I could not find the bullet entry wound, said Broward. He was losing a lot of blood. A passing cyclist then stopped and told him she was a doctor and gave the man heart massage. He never saw the gunman, and the fate of the wounded man is not yet known. He ran off past a local cinema, where people were walking quietly down the street, who had not heard. He warned whoever he could. Eyewitness Peter Fritz told the BBC about a similar experience. He heard gunfire and found a person who had been shot lying on a bridge. He said he tried to resuscitate him, but the man died. There are no ambulance services able to enter the area, apparently, he said, adding, after 45 minutes, we stopped the resuscitation attempt, because a doctor told us on the phone that it was pointless. In the nearby basketball stadium, sheltering residents broke into a rousing chorus of the national anthem in solidarity with the victim, something which was widely played on French television. Less spectators confirmed as though Rennes rendent homage of victims that fusillades at the tweets that liquid at Strasbourg. Click Twitter COMYEC9E05 end of Twitter post by @Strasbourg. One of the people there, Benedict, told NC, I was not able to sleep. I was too shocked. I had too many emotions, and he went for a late night walk later instead. Another Strasbourg resident was caught up in the drama when two police snipers took over her living room from her first-floor apartment, which the hot shots and screaming, and then police banged on her door, according to Danny Stanouville Alsace. They told her there was an exchange of fire with the shooter, and that he had taken refuge at number 5 Rue d'Épinal, directly opposite my home. They set up in the living room and moved my couch. A crack marksman stood at the wide open window, his foot planted on a chair, she said. A second snatter joined the first a little, and for a brief moment the shutters opened on the opposite window, but quickly closed. He shouted out, "It is useless trying to hide." Police then dashed down the door at number 5 and checked the neighboring buildings, but the suspect had slipped away.